Please join me in welcoming again the Honorable Jerry Patterson. Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Happy to have you back. May I put you there?
I don't like my back to the door.
No, don't freak me out. I suspect you brought protection. I'm not worried. It's okay. Commissioner, let me ask you the question that gets asked at times like you're messing with my coffee.
Morning.
Let me ask you questions. Let me ask you a question that gets asked at times like this of candidates like you. Why you? And why this office? Why are you doing this?
Well, I'm the best candidate by far. I can lead, I can motivate, I can inspire far better than the other gentlemen in the race, and we need a little bit of that in Texas right now.
Why are you running now? You could have waited until there was an open race. This is a race.
It was open.
Well, it was
open, and then, when I got in, it was going to be an open race, and I'm committed. I don't back down, and therefore it was open when I got into it, or it was expected to be open.
Well, we'll get to the fact that it's not open and the incumbent. I want to ask in a broader sense about the motivation to seek this office, because when you run against an incumbent, you're running typically for one of two reasons. You're either running because you disagree substantively with the person in the job. You would do substantive things differently, or you basically agree with the person, but you don't like how that person is executing upon those things, and you think you could execute upon them better. Which is it in this case?
It's B.
It's B. So you agree
with
Lieutenant
I don't think there's a policy difference between any of the participants in this endeavor, but I think there's going to be a process difference, in that I have no fear. I'm not afraid of what the blogs, the newspapers, the ed boards, whoever you want to say, says about me. And that's what we need. We need somebody in office who's tired of the usual BS and is not going to play to the lowest common denominator of public misinformation or pander to the audience du jour and move forward. And I'm that guy. I don't care what anybody says. This is my last office. I don't have the handicap of running for something.
So you're saying right now that if you win, let me stop you right there. You're saying right now, you're 67, which I asked and confirmed before we started. So this is your last tour. No, you don't. This is your last tour, as it were.
Exactly.
Old military guy. So if you get elected lieutenant governor, you would serve one term and then out, 2 terms and then out. Have you decided on that?
I'm planning on being a 2-term lieutenant governor.
But then you would not run for governor or any other office at that point. You're done.
Yeah.
You're committing to that right now.
Which is kind of, it's kind of freeing. I mean, it makes you free. It unfetters you.
Liberated from having to do things that would be for political reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been too much of that throughout the Republican Party, particularly as of late. Folks that pander, and pandering to whatever crowd, pandering on the 17th Amendment repeal, for example.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine that 2 candidates in the lieutenant governor race, at least 2, have said we need to start having the legislature elect U.S. senators? And they said that publicly, and they stand behind that position? I'm sorry. If that ain't pandering, I don't know what is.
To whom are people pandering? Who or what is the lowest common denominator?
I think it's a miscalculation on the panderer, because I think the panderer believes that in the particular setting that particular folks in attendance represent the majority of the Republican primary voters. You got to be able to look people in the eye and tell them, no, I disagree with you respectfully. You got to look people in the eye that have read Mark Levine's book, which advocates the repeal of the 17th Amendment, and say, well, I disagree with him on that. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing. You can't just go along and say, I want to make you happy, I want to make you like me, therefore I'm going to say what I think you want me to say.
And you're saying, just so I'm clear on this, that they're pandering to the base of the Republican Party in order to get elected?
I don't think it's the base of the Republican Party. I think it's some of the most early participants and maybe some of the loudest. I do not think that's the base. We're going to have 1.5 million votes in our primary, and I bet you that 85 to 90% of them are not in favor of repeal of the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution.
So you say don't lead by fear, be fearless, and tell people the truth and disagree with them. So that particular segment of your party, you've intrigued me that you've thrown me enough that you've thrown me kind of off of the conversation I wanted to have. We'll get back to it.
How can I do that again?
So that segment of the party, which will turn out loudly, if not in greatest numbers during the primary, you disagree with them first and foremost on the 17th Amendment, on the repeal of senators. Where else do you disagree with that wing of the party? I'm fascinated.
Well, I don't know that I disagree with them on anything else. I mean, frankly, we're talking about the Tea Party. The one thing about the Tea Party is they are not monolithic.
Right.
And I also tell you that a lot of the Tea Party folks are very, very, very well informed. They have done their homework. And then like any other group, like any other subset of any particular party, there are some that are less informed, some that are susceptible to slogans, cliches, bumper sticker slogans as a manner of, as a policy statement. And some of those are, but they're no different than anybody else.
Right.
The great thing about the Tea Party is they're motivated and they're pissed. And we need more people in public, in participating in a process that have those two traits.
You endorsed, I'm recalling, we've talked about this before, you endorsed Governor Dewhurst.
I did.
In the U.S. Senate race against Ted Cruz.
I did.
August before last, or summer before
Whenever
last,
it
or in the cycle before last, right, yeah. What happened between then and now that's caused you to not only think that he should be defeated, but that you're the one who should defeat him?
Well, that was then, this is now. I endorsed David Dewhurst for one reason, and we have a decreasing number of members of the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives that have military service, and we are sending men and women overseas in harm's way. One of them is my son, who's had 4 tours of duty as a Marine.
And is now happily back.
He's now happily stateside.
Right.
And I have this thing that we maybe need more members of the Senate, more members of the House that have had military service.
So that's why you endorsed
That's
Governor
exactly
Dewhurst.
why I did.
Had Ted Cruz served in military office, you would have endorsed Cruz?
I don't know. I have to look at that time. But the bottom line is, knowing what I knew then, I endorsed Dewhurst, and I would do that again, knowing what I knew.
So you don't regret having done it?
No, not at that time.
Yeah.
You know, now I might have a different view on it. But my point is that we really do have a Congress that is, without military experience, and that should be something we need to worry about, particularly in these times.
What has the Lieutenant Governor done to disqualify him from being, in your mind, or to discourage you from wanting him to be reelected to that office?
As far as what he's done is supporting a policy or opposing a policy, I don't have any disagreement. But if you talk to the members of the Senate of either party today, I don't think you're going to find many fans of Governor Dewhurst's leadership or lack of.
It's a style issue?
It's a style, it's a performance, it's a fear issue. It's like, okay, there are some folks that always tell you the truth when you're talking to them, but the truth changes as things move along because they believe the last sob story or the last, they attach themselves to the last position they heard.
Right.
You have to be consistent. You've got to be fair. You've got to be straight. It's just like when I was in the Senate, I learned early that your word is very important. And
Yep.
if you tell somebody you're going to vote with them, you need to stick to that. And if you change your mind, you have an obligation to go back, tag up, and say, I was with you then, I'm not now.
Are you saying he's dishonest?
No, I don't think he's dishonest.
Is he unreliable?
I think he's unreliable. He's not dishonest.
Yeah, but you think he's unreliable?
I think he's unreliable. I think, although, to be fair, maybe he says it's his last term, it might be his best, because he may not then have the fear of running for the U.S. Senate or running for governor or something like that. But that's not the point.
Who he is.
But that's not the point. And it's not just David. It's after a while. I mean, I could be land commissioner for life,
right,
and nobody knows we have a general land office.
Yeah.
You could be a variety of statewide offices nobody knows about, and you could be there forever and not lose your edge, not lose your ability to lead, motivate, and inspire. When you're governor or when you're lieutenant governor, there's some shelf life factors that are separate and apart from your performance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Your opponents in this race, Senator Patrick and Commissioner Staples, have both very aggressively attacked Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst over the Wendy Davis filibuster. That they said an example of his failed leadership is the way that he managed those couple of days, and had they been in that job, they never would have allowed that to happen. You have not been as vocal on that subject.
Well, I haven't been as vocal lately. I mean, it's out there. Why do I need to say the same thing that everybody's been hearing for the last day?
Do you agree? Commissioner Staples came out and said that David Dewhurst created Wendy Davis, that he is responsible for her as a political
I think that's an accurate assessment. Absolutely. It's been said. Everybody knows it. Why do I need to chime in and say
So
the
if
same
you were
thing?
Lieutenant Governor Patterson at that time, how would those hours have gone differently?
Well, it would have been differently for the same reasons. You've had Todd here, and I think you've had Dan, and they said the same thing, and I agree with them. That should have been addressed during the session. It should not have left the Senate without the 20-week provision in there. Then it would have passed the House and gone to the governor for signature. That was a very large error. And of course, adjourning and then reconvening the following day was another. We had the intel as to what was going to happen. You could look up in the gallery and look at the numbers of pro-con and know that something was up. It was a very bad tactical, tactical mistake.
It is said, and I would say not incorrectly, that the difference between passing such legislation during the regular session, for which Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst has been criticized for not getting it done, and the special is that the two-thirds rule was in effect during the regular and would have been an impediment to getting it done.
Okay, but we passed the bill during the regular session with the two-thirds rule intact and with the more objectionable to the pro-choice people provisions as the feature of the bill. there was, I think, a lot more support for the 20-week provision, even among Democrats. So I don't think that would have been a problem. I think we could have got the 2/3 suspension with the 20-week provision in there, passed it to the House. The House would have passed it, Governor signs it. We don't have that problem.
Yeah. You've been respectful to Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst while critical of some aspects of his leadership. You have been less respectful to Senator Patrick. You all don't seem to like one another very much, do you?
Well, who among the 4 participants does?
Well, I assume he likes himself.
I have to tell you, when a guy continues to, and I'll just use the L word, lie about positions of his opponents, it's hard to hold him with.
What specifically has he lied about? What has he lied about?
He's got something up now about a gun bill, Senate Bill 840, that he accuses me of voting for, and you know what, I did. But he states that it was a bill that prohibited guns on campus, and you know what? It didn't.
He's trying to suggest that you're somehow weak on campus carry.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he goes very far with that. Nobody can outgun me today, or
ever. Let's just accept ever.
Yeah.
Right,
but you can't just say things that are factually inaccurate. But see, here's the difference with Senator Patrick. I'm not sure, but what he doesn't believe that, which creates a whole nother.
Which is?
Do you believe things that are obviously patently false? And have you convinced yourself of that? I mean, that's an issue that needs to be concerned.
You think he's qualified to hold the office?
I think he's qualified to hold the office. I think it would be a disaster.
You think it'd be a disaster because?
The Republican Party would be a disaster for the Republican Party because the rhetoric that he uses to get there is not going to endear us to those who we hope to have soon join our party.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and the rhetoric I'm talking about is immigration stuff, but it's an interesting dynamic because all 4 candidates in this race, and I've challenged them on this on more than one occasion, all 4 candidates have publicly stated that we cannot deport 12 million illegal aliens. All 4 of us.
Yeah.
All 4 candidates have stated we need a guest worker program. But you sure as hell wouldn't know that now. There's only one candidate that consistently, repetitively speaks to an immigration reform that is more than a cliche bumper sticker that says build a fence, electrify the barbed wire, or secure our borders. And I'm not necessarily opposed to all those things. There's only one person who's talking the truth and actually speaking something. There's only one person who led on this issue in the Republican convention in June of 2012, stood up before 8,000 delegates at the convention and said, we need a guest worker program as a component of border security, walked away from the mic thinking that was the end of my political career, and it passed overwhelmingly.
Yeah. That's
what we need. Someone who will boldly lead and not consider the political consequences of doing so. And I'm the guy compared to all the 4 by
the other big issue that's come up in this race on the immigration question, or on not exactly immigration, but is in-state tuition.
Yeah.
Right. So you are all opposed to in-state tuition,
yes.
although
and I'm not sure. The reasons may differ, but my problem with it is we continue, and this is where Todd and I agree. We continue to band-aid this issue of a undocumented, illegal, whatever population, whatever term you want to use, population that we have in Texas, whatever the number is, 1.8 million, whatever, I don't know. We continue to band-aid it by doing this and doing that and doing this. We need to come up with a process and a plan that addresses the big picture, as to, and for example, the DREAM Act. I support the DREAM. And these are kids who didn't break our laws. These are kids who were brought here by their parents when they were 2 years old, maybe, whatever it is. DREAM Act for military service. And when I have said that and somebody in the audience gets mad at me, I said, what branch of the service did you serve in?
But you understand that supporting the DREAM Act, or if you were to support in-state tuition, as Governor Perry did famously at that debate in the presidential race, you can get booed in some audiences.
I don't care if I'm getting booed. I'm just telling you that we have 12 million illegal aliens, and if you want to solve our border security problem, we need to have our Border Patrol, our Immigration Customs Enforcement, law enforcement chasing narco traffickers, coyotes, the guy that drives drunk Friday night wrong way on the freeway and kills people, instead of chasing the guy that's hanging drywall, the guy that's putting shingles on somebody's house, or the guy that's working in a restaurant. You do that, you take that subset. I'm a 24-year Marine. I know about a defensive perimeter. You take the number of folks that are on the other side, you reduce that 12 million to the subset of people who are criminals. And we take our resources and we chase the criminals. And we take that other sector, and this is in the Republican Party platform. I'm not out here on this. Take that other sector and you have them come out of the underground economy and pay taxes. What an interesting concept. Have workers' comp. health insurance. And, you know, I am specific. If you go to my website, votepatterson.com, go to issues, select these various issues, and read what I have to say, particularly on immigration, you know, it's there. It's there. You know, we've got to do something different, and the problem is we simplify it, dumb it down, and I'll give you an example. Todd Staples, friend of mine, he continually talks about his 6-point plan to solve our immigration problem that starts with border security and does not have amnesty. Well, I had trouble finding, and I thought it was a secret plan, but I found it. It's a total of 24 words. Point number 1, secure our borders. Well, that's a pretty out there thought. Point number 2, enforce our laws. Point number 3, document illegal immigrants. I mean, that's really cutting edge. We need more specificity than that. We need, it's on my website. It's in the Republican Party platform.
Yeah.
Our platform says we need a guest worker program.
So let me come at you from one side and the other side on the issue of immigration specifically. So Senator Patrick has tried to paint you as soft on immigration by virtue of your willingness to entertain many of the things, whether it's support undocumented persons who are hanging drywall and whatever, or moving people from an illegal status to a legal status so that the in-state tuition question becomes irrelevant. He is specifically on his website attacking you
exactly.
for being
And here
somehow
it is.
soft on immigration.
I have Dan on video.
Yeah.
In 2012, talking to a Woodland Tea Party group where he says we cannot deport 12 million illegal aliens, and where he says we need a guest worker program. Yeah. We've got a copy of a press release. So we have the Dan of before running for lieutenant governor, and we have the Dan of today. It's similar to the budget vote. 2 votes in favor of the budget, then he decides to run for light gov, and then there's a vote against. Yeah. We don't need that.
So the answer on that side is basically that he's playing every side of the issue.
He cites an article in the El Paso Times where I said we need to fix the larger problem and we won't have to worry about in-state tuition. Right. And one of the ways to do that is a DREAM Act for military service.
Now, on the other side of this, you will hear from some Republicans, but more from Democrats and some independents, that the Republican Party generally has been too hardline on the issue of immigration. You are supportive of some things that often get border fence, other stuff. I want to ask you about that from a policy standpoint, but I also want to ask you about that from a political standpoint and the challenges that your party may have had with Latinos.
Here's how we do that. And Texas is uniquely blessed with a common heritage and history. Right. We have Anglos and Tejanos. I don't like the word Hispanic. Tejanos. Yeah. You know, my former opponent, Hector Uribe, his family had been here for 8 generations, you know, far longer than mine. Right. We need to talk about the things that bind us together. And I've got we're going to launch a Tejanos for Patterson. We've got a really good video done by Lionel Sosa. And it starts out with me, and I cite 9 names: Abanillo, Espalier, Nave, and I don't want to go through the whole names. And you know, after I mentioned Bowie, Crockett, and Travis, and then I cite these 9 names, and I say, who are those folks? Those are the 9 Tejanos who died at the Alamo fighting for liberty, and that fight was not Mexicans versus Texans, it was tyranny versus liberty, and these men chose liberty. We need to talk about the things that bind us as much as we talk about the things that divide us. And we also need to change our rhetoric a little bit. We don't need to change our message. You talk to folks along the Rio Grande Valley, and down in the Trans-Pecos area, they also are very concerned about border security, even the Tejanos. You know, so we don't disagree, we have this way of just saying things.
Whose rhetoric are you saying needs to be changed?
The Republican Party rhetoric, not the message, but the rhetoric. We need to start talking about the things that we have in common. Yeah. We need to get rid of that idea that the current mayor of San Antonio's mother said that she hates the Alamo because it represented the oppressive white man, and we need to talk about we were in this deal together. And that war was a war between Santa Anna, who had killed people in Zacatecas, 2,000 civilians before he came to the Alamo. We need to talk about our history. If we do that, we can find something that's common, and then we can move forward on the things that need to be addressed, such as immigration. It's not just immigration, it's immigration, border security, and assimilation. You know, for example, I've got to tell you, talking about assimilation, why is it that we offer multilingual ballots? Why do we have a Spanish language ballot or a Vietnamese language ballot or whatever it is, language ballot? Because that continues to keep us separate. It needs to be an English language ballot, in part because you know what my name is on the Spanish language ballot? Jerry Patterson. How hard can this be? We need to assimilate people and not give them a continued excuse to be in a separate culture, separate and apart. I love it when people preserve their heritage, whether it's Polish, whether it's German, whether it's, whether it's Mexican. That's a wonderful thing. But we are Americans, and we need to come together on that. We need to recognize we have one language that we all need to speak very well.
You mentioned Senator Patrick's budget vote. He was one of 4 votes against the budget ultimately, whatever he did, as you say, previous. Do you believe that the budget was a good document, a good budget this time? And if you were Lieutenant Governor, would you have been supportive of it? There are some who say, I was with Senator Campbell, one of the 4 no votes on the budget the other day in San Marcos, and she made the argument, often made, that the state increased its spending by end of session versus end of the previous session by 26%.
Yeah, well, see, that's
way too much
why
money.
I have to tell you, my experience at the General Land Office, we manage a portfolio, $1 billion real estate portfolio. We are participants in managing the permanent school fund. The payout of the permanent school fund is based upon the growth in the fund, and it's not based upon the growth of the fund in the prior year. It's trailing quarters. It's 16 trailing quarters. It's 4 years. You have to average this stuff out, because just as when I was laid off in the early 80s during the all bust, and my expenditures went way down, and then when I got a good job, they went way up. The standard that Donna apparently used was, okay, if you lose your job, you can't spend any more than you did the year before when you were unemployed. It doesn't make sense. You've got to have a broader look at the overall growth of the budget.
So you would have been a yes vote had you been in the Senate.
I would have been a yes vote.
Time.
And I'm familiar with this. This is the game played in the legislature. People, particularly in the Senate, there's a bill that everybody, you want to pass, but you want to have the ability to say you voted no for it. So you go up there and you hover around the secretary's desk to see if you can vote no, and proudly say, I voted no.
But be sure.
But then if it comes down to the short hairs and you're the vote that's needed to pass it, you'll vote yes. It's posturing. It's the lowest thing you can possibly do. Be straight with people. If you can't explain it, if you can't sell it, you don't deserve to be in office.
Let me ask you about a couple of ethics things, if you don't mind. One place where you and Senator Patrick, to come back to him, have been going round and round is over what you say is his unwillingness to disclose information about his personal bankruptcy, any liens that he has, his change of name, and you've asked him for 7 years of tax returns. Basically what you've said is, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Join me in disclosing. You have yet to disclose. I don't expect that the first thing you do in the morning, Commissioner, is read the Tribune. But today we have a story.
It is. That's exactly what I do.
If that's the case, then today you saw a story about our attempt to get from the 48 candidates for state office this cycle, their 3 years of tax returns. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst provided us with 3 years of his tax returns as we asked for them. Commissioner Staples provided us with 3 years. You and Senator Patrick did not. If you want to trump Senator Patrick on non-disclosure, why not disclose yours and shame him into disclosing his? Why hold yours back if on principle you're willing to release them, but only if he releases them?
We had a little kerfuffle down in Houston at a forum in which he used the double dipping, referring to my...
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah,
we're going to come to that next.
I kind of thought you might.
Heads up.
I kind of thought you might.
Right, yeah.
And I said, if you're worried about, if you have an interest in my personal finances, I have a really big interest in yours. And I said, Dan, I'll do 7 years worth of tax returns if you will do 7 years worth of tax returns, and if you will talk about all the assumed names, and if you will talk about all the bankruptcies, and if you'll talk about all the liens, and if you'll talk about all of this. You disclose that, I'll disclose mine. You show me yours, I'll show you mine.
Right.
And he dismissed that out of hand. There's a lot there.
Well, there may be.
Yeah,
but
well, no, there is.
But why don't you?
There is.
But why don't you disclose yours?
Well, because I have made a challenge to Dan Patrick. He hasn't responded in a manner that I expect him to respond, and that's where I stand today.
But the principle of transparency and good government and the climate in which politics is practiced today is the public wants to see that you're not using any of your public responsibilities to enrich yourself personally, and they want to know where your sources of income are. And as I said, a number of other candidates running for statewide office, including two
I'll
of
tell
the
you where my
opponents.
sources of income are.
Yeah.
I got a state salary, I have a Marine Corps retirement, and I've got a Social Security check.
If it's that simple, you could, with the touch of a button, show us that stuff specifically.
I could.
But why? So why don't you?
Because I have issued a challenge to Dan Patrick, and he needs to respond to
It's
that
entirely
challenge.
about that.
Yeah. I generally don't back down. When I believe in something strongly, he has a hell of a lot of things that he wishes not to disclose.
On this double dipping question, we're referring to the practice of accepting a state salary on the one hand and taking your retirement or your pension on the other concurrently. This was something that came up in the 2012 presidential race when it was discovered that Governor Perry was doing such a thing. It's known as double dipping. You are not currently doing it, but have said if elected Lieutenant Governor, you would
I have an announcement. I'm going to make news right here today.
go do it.
I'm going to dedicate 100% of my net state salary to charity as Lieutenant Governor.
You're going to dedicate 100% of your net state
And I'm
salary.
challenging the other candidates to do the same.
Right. So you would not be paid anything as Lieutenant Governor?
No,
from the
my
salary.
net state salary, which is
Yeah.
something less than $600. I'm going to dedicate my state salary to education, to charity.
To charity. So this question of accepting both at the same time, you think is a
I think it's a
non-issue.
legitimate question when
Yeah.
you're making a $150K salary
Yeah.
and when you're making some substantial
So
amount
you
in
disagree
retirement.
with the governor's decision to have done that?
Yeah,
since
I
he
would
has
not
a
have
real
done.
salary.
I would not have done that. There's a difference between making $150K and making $7,000. I'm taking it off the table. I'm taking my entire $7,000 annual salary
donating.
and I'm going to dedicate. I'm going to donate to charity, and I challenge the other three gentlemen to do the same.
You know that Greg Abbott, who I believe...
That's really substantive, isn't it?
Well, it's specific.
I mean,
will
this
say it's
is what we're
specific.
down to,
Yeah.
This is what we're down
Trying
to.
to find differences.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Greg Abbott, who you support for governor, has put out a series of ethics proposals, one of which would eliminate the ability of someone like you in that position to accept the pension alongside the salary. You and he are not in the same place on this.
We're not for lieutenant governor. Here's the problem in part with politics is it's the domain of the rich guy. Who can afford to be, you can afford to be a state rep or state senator because it's a part-time job. But lieutenant governor is a full-time job. So we want to make it to so only rich white guys or whatever color, whatever description you wish to use can be lieutenant governor. I don't think that's in the public interest. We need to have more folks in the public office. We need more pipe fitters and teachers.
Right.
And fewer wealthy guys.
Of course, those folks would not be able to afford on $7,200 a year, and they may not have access to a
Well,
pension.
I'm not talking about, the legislature is a part-time gig. I am not an advocate of increasing legislative pay. But what I'm saying is that we got somebody who's going to be a full-time lieutenant governor, as am I, who's not going to have a radio show running from like Pappy O'Daniel did. And he had a radio show. He sold flour out of the governor's mansion on Sunday mornings with a radio show. Patrick has said that he's going to run his radio show out of the Capitol. If that is not something to be concerned about, I don't know what is. There's a difference between making $150K as Governor Perry
Right.
and making $7,000 as Lieutenant Governor.
So you
Patterson.
think you would disagree with General Abbott that this should be taken off the table, that it should be made illegal?
I disagree as far as a full-time job making $7,200 a month, and it's really not just about Jerry Patterson. It's about somebody who would like to run for Lieutenant Governor 10, 20 years from now and can't do it, and therefore it becomes the domain of the rich guy.
Let me ask you about the health of the state of Texas. Do you think we're doing okay, generally speaking?
I think we're doing extremely well.
Yeah.
And of course, David's got a really good ad about that now,
Right.
taking complete and total credit for
And
that.
you're referring sort of at the satellite view, the economy is healthy, you feel like everything in the state is...
but we're doing extremely well right
Yeah.
now, but it's because we're blessed with a couple things.
Yeah.
Hydrocarbon energy, which
Yeah.
I've had a great part in continuing to be, developed and produced here in Texas as Land Commissioner. Hydrocarbon energy, the usual predictable regulatory environment.
Right.
However, what is going to occur here in 10 to 20 years,
Right.
if we don't do things now when they're less expensive and we wait to do them then when they're catastrophically expensive, we got a problem.
Example.
Water.
Right.
Yeah, and go to votepatterson.com, select issues, go to water, and you'll see what I talk about it. Great detail. We need some statutory changes. We need to have a real water plan instead of a water. It was a good start. I mean, the water plan we have now, but we've got issues about groundwater, and I have to tell you, the Tribune's done a really good job about writing on this, and I can't remember your reporter doing it.
Nina Satijan.
Yes, yeah, great job. She mentioned the most recent thing that I've been saying for some time. We have groundwater conservation districts based upon political boundaries, not on aquifer boundaries. I mean, one of the most prolific aquifers is the Wilcox, Carrizo-Wilcox, and the Simsabor beneath that. And we've got all these different kinds of regulations.
Yeah.
We need to look at aquifer storage and recovery. We need to look at conservation. The greatest increase in the amount of water available is going to be conservation.
Water you already have.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about, the standard green conservation. We're going to have to reach a point where we don't have everybody with a San Augustine plantation. We got to look at desal of groundwater. Desal, there's 100 years of water availability. If we desal it, it's expensive, and the problem we have is that people do not. Well, actually, that's changed. To the great credit of Texas and the legislature, there's a great public awareness for the first time in a long time that water is an issue.
I guess the question, though, Commissioner, on this issue, on the other physical infrastructure issue that will soon be before voters, transportation,
Yeah.
water and transportation, the concern was Some money out of the rainy day fund was allocated, provided the voters say yes, as they did on water, will be on transportation, but it's really, relatively speaking, not very much compared to the totality of the expense. The Tribune reported this week that although the state's economy is healthy, child poverty in the state is up. We know that we are famously first among states in terms of the number of people who are uninsured.
Yes.
Our performance on public education compared to other states is a mixed bag at best. I could go down the list. People view sometimes the Texas miracle purely through the lens of the economic health of the state, but there's an underside to the Texas miracle that often doesn't get discussed.
There is an underside. However, whatever that underside may be, if we had high unemployment and a deficit spending legislature, that dark underbelly would be much darker and much larger.
And more visible.
And more visible.
Right.
And we can fix that underside. I take it back. You cannot fix it completely. You can make it dramatically better. I mean, that's one of the problems with the Congress. They believe they have to have 100% fix for everything when they recognize if we got half of it, for example, on uninsured and Obamacare and things like that. We have to recognize that there's things we can do here in Texas. However, there are things we have to have reliance on the Congress to do, and they're not doing a very good job.
So are there affirmative steps that as Lieutenant Governor you see that we should be taking that we're not taking now on things like health care, on things like water and transportation beyond what's been done that would provide some help for some of these issues that exist, we acknowledge, even though the economy
one
is
of the things
healthy?
is you got to be straight with the people, and you got to be able to go out there and sell what we need to do. And the things that I proposed, and of course I propose things that are specific in this race, and to my great credit in my leadership, the others follow along, in citing the same numbers. For example, a dedicated revenue source for highway, and the thing that, and Senator Nichols had this. I think actually Bullock had this idea before, but Senator Nichols had a bill that would dedicate the vehicle sales tax as a dedicated revenue source for public transportation. That's $6 billion. And TxDOT has said they need $4 billion to maintain current. So there are things we can do, but it takes leadership. You got to go out there and sell it. And I'm the guy that can do that.
If before we go to the audience, if you make it through this primary,
what do you mean
if you will almost certainly face Senator Van de Putte, somebody you know, who is not, as has been the case with some Democratic candidates of past cycles, a cardboard cutout. She's a real candidate, a real politician, somebody with experience who, you may disagree with her on substantive issues, but she will not just be a patsy in this race again, as some have been in the last 20 years. What do you do about her? What do you think of her? How do you run
I'll tell you
against
what
her?
I don't do.
What's the conversation?
The first thing I don't do is what our current Lieutenant Governor came out and dismissively say, I don't think I have to worry about her. We don't need, as Republicans, the party that's too often perceived as the old white guy party, to start making dismissive comments about ladies. I mean, Letitia's a friend of mine. She's a good lady. She's had a really tough year with some personal things that happened, tragedies that happened, and she will be treated with respect. And I'll tell you this, unlike some other Republicans of the last several years that say, well, I'm not going to debate you, or I'm not going to go to editorial boards, I'll be at every single appearance. I'll be on the street, I'll be on the road, I will be there with Letitia and I, whatever venue that works out, and it's going to be a campaign. I don't care if we're polling 20 points ahead, it's going to be a campaign. I'm not going to bug out on editorial boards. That's, whether you think you're going to win or lose on the endorsement, you need to be there. And that's the kind of campaign I can. You recall, Hector Uribe, my last general election opponent, and I were the only ones that had a debate in that
for Land Commissioner.
Yeah, for Land Commissioner. Of course, we had a crowd, a huge crowd, about a third of this, I might add, that showed up.
I remember. I moderated it.
You owe that to the people of Texas to show up and show the flag.
Yeah. So what is your substantive campaign against Senator Van de Putte if you're the Republican nominee?
Well, there's some issues. I mean, it's kind of down to the Second Amendment issues. It's kind of down to the spending issues. It's down to the life issue. Those are the things. And then you get into the standard Democrat
R versus D stuff.
Exactly. R versus D stuff. And again, Letitia, I like her. She's a friend of mine. And it will be a cordial, gentlemanly, and gentle lady-ly, whatever, debate.
Okay. Commissioner, thank you for your willingness to answer these questions and your patience with me.